Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight for the Missoula Mayor's Candidate Forum, sponsored by Missoula Neighborhoods and the League of Women Voters of Missoula. My name is Mary Laporte, and I'm president of the Missoula League of Women Voters. I would like to begin this forum by reading. I would like to ask everyone to silence their cell phones. And then I'm going to resume by reading the League of Women Voters Land Acknowledgement Statement. The League of Women Voters of Missoula acknowledges that we gather on the traditional lands of the Salish, Kootenai, Kalispel, Penderay, Blackfeet, and Shoshone tribes. The voting rights of these Native peoples were not secured until the 1960s. 40 years after the 19th Amendment secured the right to vote for some women. The League is committed to protecting equal access to voting and resisting efforts to disenfranchise. I'd like to thank Kalina Pritchard and Melissa Glucker of the Missoula Neighborhoods Councils for coordinating this forum, our League of Women Voters volunteers, and MCAT for broadcasting tonight. We have a live audience here in City Council chamber, and I ask the audience to hold your applause until the end of the forum so that we can maximize the time candidates have to answer their questions. I'd like to thank our candidates tonight for your willingness to serve Missoula and for participating in tonight's forum. Tonight's forum features our two candidates for Missoula Mayor, Andrea Davis and Mike Nugent. We thank Andrea and Mike for your hard work and commitment in stepping forward to run for the office of mayor. Missoula faces a significant transition as we prepare for the first full term of a new mayor following the longtime tenure of John Engen. Your leadership will be greatly needed as our community enters a new era and addresses the challenges ahead. We'd like to thank Gwen Jones for serving as acting mayor during this transition, and Jordan Hess, who has served as Missoula's mayor since September 2022. This forum follows a nonpartisan, unbiased, and impartial format established by the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, nonprofit membership organization, and we never support candidates or political parties. The purpose of this forum is to give Missoula voters the opportunity to submit written questions to the candidates and hear the candidates' responses. Audience members may write a question on the cards provided, and we will collect them. We have volunteers here tonight. People also had the opportunity to submit questions to the Missoula Neighborhoods website by noon today, and we have those in hand. Candidates will be asked as many questions as time permits. There may not be enough time to ask all the questions submitted, and believe me, we have a lot of questions. The questions have been screened for duplication. Both candidates will answer each question, and each candidate will have the same amount of time to respond. Responses will be strictly timed to ensure fairness. The order candidates respond will rotate so that each candidate will have the opportunity to speak first and last. Just before this evening's forum, we drew candidates' numbers from this basket to determine the speaking order. We will start with opening statements, then we'll have questions, and we'll end with closing statements from the candidates. We will begin now with the 2-minute opening statements from our candidates, and we will begin with Andrea Davis.
Great. And I think you can hear me? All right. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, League of Women Voters and the Office of Neighborhoods for this opportunity, and then everyone in the audience for taking time this evening, as well as folks that are watching from home. My name is Andrea Davis. I'm a candidate for mayor of Missoula, and I'm honored to be here tonight. I have a long history here in Missoula of community service. For 22 years, I have been working in the community development and housing sector. I am a first-time candidate, but I am certainly no stranger to government. In fact, I have sat here in this room for over 20 years. In fact, not quite in this room, but across the way when city council chambers were in City Hall, both providing comment as a member of the public and then bringing important issues in front of council for consideration over the years. I'm running for mayor because I am a lifelong Montanan and I've been a Missoula resident. This has been my home for 25 years. I am seeing the challenges and feeling the challenges that you are as well. And because of the experience that I have in terms of the breadth of work I have had in this field, as well as the depth of experience, I do believe that I am the right candidate at this time to help solve some of Missoula's most challenging issues. In addition to my work here in Missoula, building homes that Missoulians can afford, I've been doing that work statewide. And in addition to building homes, I have been helping create policy at the state level. I do believe that that is something that's very important for the office of mayor, especially as we take on some of our greater challenges that will require coordination with the state legislature. And so I'm very eager to answer questions tonight and look forward to what you all have to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. And Mike?
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking the time to put this together. And I think I speak for Andrea as well when we joke that we've been to several of these, but it's always so great to see so many people in the audience and participating. I think that for the first time in a long time, we're having a very good conversation in this community, and I'm honored to be a part of it and looking forward to what comes in front of us. I am born and raised in Missoula. My wife, Stacy, and I are raising two wonderful kids here, attending the same public schools that I did. And I decided to run for mayor because I want to fight for their future and all the people in Missoula struggling to kind of stay above water. That is our service workers who are struggling to live here. That's teachers, that's firefighters. Missoula has become a place that is tough for people to afford to live in. Home ownership rates are at 45%. The national average is over 60. The state average is over 60. And over the last decade, that has fallen almost 10%. We're quickly becoming a community of the haves and the have-nots. And I think that we have to stop and ask ourselves, what is that going to look like in another year? I'm proud in this race to have the exclusive endorsement of the Firefighters Union and the Central Labor Council. I've enjoyed working with the firefighters while serving on this body in this room. They've seen me up close, and I'm honored by that endorsement. I think that one of the things I'm most proud of in the 30 seconds I have left in this is I try and tackle challenges head on, and I'm not afraid to ask the tough questions. And sometimes that ruffles feathers, but I think that's what being a leader is about. And that is what I will promise you that I'll bring to the mayor's office. We will have the tough conversations. We'll have people in the room with differing views, and we'll try and put what's best for Missoula first.
Great, thank you, Mike. I was given a note to ask you both to speak a little bit farther away from the microphone. And now we'll move to the questions submitted by the public. The questions fall into several broad categories, and I will divide up the time so that we can get to some questions in each of these categories. And if you would like me to repeat the question, please do. Let us begin. I thought that it might be nice to start with this one, given that many of our citizens are over at the university right now, celebrating the Held v. Montana case and submitting comments to Montana DEQ about the impacts of climate change. So our first question is, what city community infrastructure would you endorse to help reduce climate change, and why? And Mike, if you would start, please.
I think one of the biggest barriers, honestly, to everyday Missoulians being part of the climate change conversation is helping people understand that some of the things we can do are easy. You know, Missoula is a community that I think is primed and ready to embrace composting in a way that we haven't before. We've got a great waste facility out by out at the edge of Mole Road by the river there, and it's actually a very fascinating field trip if anybody wants to take it sometime. Of all the places I've been on council, that's where I learned the most. But right next to that is the old eco compost, Missoula compost, and I think there's an opportunity in this town to embrace and make it easier for people to sort what's going into the landfill versus what we can reuse in other ways. The time is right. We've got 2 garbage collectors who we can reach out to and work together to help get people to sort that and get that from their home to the proper place, and it's going to save our landfill moving forward.
Great. Thank you. Andrea?
Okay, I won't eat the microphone. I think one of the greatest opportunities that we have in the immediate future is to continue to go after resources made available to us through the federal government, through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and the Inflation Reduction Act. Some time ago, and in recent time, the city of Missoula purchased a very large solar installation and placed it out at the wastewater treatment facility. The wastewater treatment facility in the city of Missoula is the largest consumer of energy and the largest producer of the city of Missoula's fossil fuels. We know fossil fuels are the #1 contributor to climate change. We have heard and we know for 30 years now that that is the way that we are going to arrest the abrupt climate change. We heard in most recent days that we actually do stand a chance if we make significant changes, and we can do that at the city level. What I would like to do is use the direct pay system where the municipality can purchase even more solar and further reduce our consumption and also save dollars.
Thank you. And then a follow-up on a personal level that someone submitted tonight. What steps, large and small, are you making in your lifestyle to reduce your carbon footprint and help stop climate change? And Andrea.
Thank you for this question. It's something I'm personally passionate about. I was telling a story that I found my book, 50 Things You Can Do to Save the Planet, and I had it since I've been 12 years old, and I didn't realize the point of highlighting because the entire book is highlighted. I got it when I was in 7th grade as our guidebook for Earth Day. I went to the University of Montana and earned a degree in organizational communications and environmental studies because I wanted to change business from the inside out. And that is why I've dedicated my 22-year career in building homes that are affordable and using sustainable methods to do that. So I not only have spent my career in dedicated to this field, but personally, I reduce my consumption by biking and walking when I can, taking the bus. I sit on Mountain Lion's board of directors and have been part of the leadership there to get the bus to be zero emissions. We recycle and we keep our heat low. We also compost and grow our own food as much as possible and order a CSA from our friend who's a farmer.
Great, thank you. And Mike?
Thanks. This is a great question. We do a lot of things most Missoula families do, recycle and things of that nature. But I think that given what's going on right now and the complete lack of action and responsibility from the Public Service Commission, one of the things that we're strongly considering is solar panels. And I think that that is actually important to send a message that we can do some of this ourselves. We don't need to rely on Northwestern Energy, who is gouging us with rate increases. I think it's time for the people of Missoula to fight back and to push back. And that's just one way to do that. Through the Inflation Reduction Act, there are actually opportunities for tax credits and for ways for families to make a real difference fighting climate change in their own homes that benefit them in their daily lives.
Great. Thank you both. The next set of questions have to do with collaboration at various levels. My first question, and Mike will begin, is how would you foster cooperation and collaboration among city council members to achieve common goals?
You know, my time on council has been brief, but I think during that time, council members would say that I'm someone who's always willing to help bring an idea to the floor, even if it's one that I don't ultimately support. I think that having the space to have conversations as a community is very important. And that's something that, in my opinion, over the years, the city council has abdicated their responsibility a little bit. And we need to make sure that we create space for opinions and ideas, both majority opinion and minority opinion. I have worked with people on council who, have voted for me. I've worked with people who voted for someone else. I've helped bring items to the floor with our most liberal member and our most conservative member. And I think that willingness to set aside ideologies and focus on if the idea makes sense and if there's merit to having the conversation is our path forward, not just in Missoula, but across the state.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I would utilize the tools that I have over the years to collaborate with council as I have with my own board of directors. As an executive director of 15 years, I have worked with the board of directors very similarly to city council, where they are setting policy and strategy for the organization, and then I'm the executive to administer and carry that out. Additionally, with the work I've done at the legislative level, working with people that have come from very different perspectives, but at the end of the day, what I have found to be successful is building personal relationships with people, getting to know them individually, understanding what motivates them, the desire behind certain policy and initiatives that they wish to see move forward, and then finding commonality, but also finding where we can compromise. Most often, any good piece of legislation does not look like the idea that you may have come up with to begin with, but has actually the contribution from many.
Thank you. Our next question that came in today. What do you see as your part in the relationship between Missoula County and the city of Missoula? How do you see these two governing bodies working within the areas of the county that have been annexed by the city? And Andrea, you'll begin, please.
Thank you for that question. I think there is incredible opportunity, especially as we grow. Both the county as well as the city are improving our growth policies and development codes. We know that the county is ahead of the city in terms of updating its zoning policy and in some cases putting zoning in place where it hadn't been in years past. So we will need to be working closely in certain areas like the Y, just northwest of city limits, to be considering what that growth strategy is going to be, because there will be additional homes, industrial properties and commercial built out there. The other way that I see us working together in the near future is so areas that we work directly. We just talked about climate change. There is great opportunity for us as two jurisdictions to make excellent impact here locally.
And Mike?
I think that we can start right with climate change. The city and the county are partners with Bozeman, with the city of Bozeman, to try and develop a green tariff where people who choose to invest in clean energy can do that on their power bill. I think that's a perfect example of things that we can do well together. I also think there are times where there is a city of Missoula and there's a county of Missoula, and those voters and the opinions of those bodies are different, and the city needs to be a leader in certain things. There are a lot of urban areas that are just outside the city limits. They are city residents in every name but actual taxpayer, and they interact with the city every day. So we need to make sure that as we consider things like annexation and as we consider policies that impact people like sewer growth, that we're factoring in what is that relationship with the kind of bubble around the city, the donut, the urban core, and how can we make sure that we're being fair to both the taxpayers of Missoula, so they're not being overburdened, and the people who are using services outside the city.
Okay. Thank you. Now I'm going to read this next question just as it came in today. Both candidates use the term city-private partnerships as a funding method. These activities can require significant hours of staff time and detract from the core business of city government. Is it worth the city's time to pursue these partnerships? And give an example of a successful city-private partnership. And Mike, if you would start.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it depends entirely on what the service is. There are definitely areas where we as a city have a department and we do things because the city can do it most efficiently. There are also areas where we may not be the best lead, but we can be a partner. And a perfect example of that is actually when the MRA invests in a housing project such as the Villaggio, which is the largest low-income housing tax credit project in the state's history. And is opening up 200 new affordable apartment units for the city of Missoula. That is a project that is a private project, but it would not have happened without an investment in infrastructure from the MRA, and that is absolutely impacting Missoulians. So there are times where we're not going to be the lead on something like that, but the city needs to have a seat at the table. And I think that we got to be careful and evaluate every one of those opportunities one by one.
Thank you, Andrea.
Yeah. I agree. I believe that the city has a real role, but we should not be the ones that are staffing up to be developers, for example. I believe that the city needs to be relying on our private sector partners, and that includes both for-profit and nonprofit and other government partners. An example that I would use also is a housing project, and it's the Trinity Apartments project that my organization is building as we speak. It's 202 apartments, so it's a little bit bigger than the Bellagio. And it is, in every sense, a public-private partnership, including with the county. The county donated 5 acres of land, and we have built on 2 separate properties in Missoula. We've utilized federal financing, but the locality also contributed $50,000 through the Missoula Redevelopment Agency. And like I said, the county donated the land. And so that's a very good example of my organization bringing private financing to a property that the city and the county were able to contribute their resources to as well.
Great, thank you. The next category that we're going to focus on, that we've been hearing so much about the last year or years, is affordable housing. This I'm reading again, we got this today. Both candidates state they are knowledgeable and have been working on affordable housing projects and services in Missoula for many years. In your experience, what approach or program have been the most successful? What specific ideas are you considering as next steps? Andrea?
Well, what I just talked about, where we are utilizing financing that creates what we often say in our industry, which is affordable housing with a capital A. That means we're using public financing that actually has what we say deed restricted affordable housing. It means that it's actually guaranteed to be affordable at a certain level. We need that, particularly in our housing market right now, where much of the conventional market is increasing by dramatic leaps and bounds, historic leaps and bounds, and displacing so many longtime Missoulians. So we need to continue on that front. There are opportunities through our Affordable Housing Trust Fund here locally in Missoula, where we can leverage more of that financing and actually bring more of that private equity to more properties and projects. That said, my organization has also built homeownership opportunities through Community Land Trust. Most recently, we built 6 small homes on a small piece of property next to the Missoula Food Bank. Those are affordable to people earning 80 to 120% of area median income. So those sold for about $120,000, and there's 6 homes that are affordable into perpetuity.
Mike?
This is a great question because there is not one single answer to housing. We can't look at housing and say, this is the one path forward, because so much of our needs stretch the spectrum. Prior to being on city council, I was on the Missoula Housing Authority. And so I was part of the approval process for the Bellagio project that I think has more bedrooms than Trinity, but they're both great projects. So we are not competing about this. We have equal love for both those projects. And so I understand that that has to be part of our solution. But we also need to keep in mind that there are huge sections of Missoula who will never qualify for any sort of subsidy or deed restricted housing, but still deserve to be able to afford to live here. We're talking about our firefighters, our police officers, our teachers, our young professionals, our service workers. One of the first things that we had to do when I got elected to council last year was extend the barrier where first responders could live further outside of town because they couldn't afford to live here. Many of them aren't going to ever qualify for a subsidy, but we need to help them too.
You've mentioned workforce housing, Mike, just now, and this next question is, I'll read it just as we received it. Now I hear that you need to speak up, so.
Can't please everybody, I don't know.
I'm reading this. The Equinox, Solstice, Meadowlark, and Garden District are important low-income housing solutions, but only contribute around $1,000 to Missoula's tax base for tens of millions of dollars in value. As tax increases are a significant issue, do you feel tax-paying workforce housing is as critical in solving Missoula's housing crisis?
Who's that?
Yeah, Mike.
Is it Mike first? Okay.
I think the main idea is that if it's accurate, if those are not property tax paying properties, and whether they should be.
You know, we need solutions across the spectrum, like I discussed, and there are going to be great housing opportunities that take some of our most vulnerable folks out of the cutthroat rental market. And some of those projects might not pay the same rate of taxes, but that's part of what we need to do to make sure that we're creating a healthy environment for everybody to live and thrive in Missoula. I definitely believe in everybody paying their fair share, but there are times where it makes sense to have a large deed restricted housing project that isn't getting taxed at the same rate. Now, that's all dictated by state law. That's not anything that the city of Missoula itself can choose to waive property taxes here or there. So we're talking about larger scale tax policies. But I don't think that is the answer. I actually think that if we are concerned about who's paying taxes and who's not, there are a lot of other things that we should be tackling, and it starts working at the state.
Great, thank you. Andrea?
Yes. Agreed. There is opportunity to take a look at, there's tax exempt property across our community, our hospitals, Forest Service, the University of Montana, major employers. And it is a factor in communities, but the reality is we know that these organizations contribute, as does these affordable homes. I will say the reason that there is state legislation allowing for tax exemption for properties that operate so thinly is because there is no room. You're charging such little rent that is the way that those properties can operate. There is room for tax-paying affordable and workforce housing, which these are workforce as well. But I will say the example I used earlier of a community land trust, that is something that still can operate as a place where the land is held in trust and the homes are sold for an affordable rate. That land itself does not necessarily have to be tax exempt, and it depends on the prices of the home and the income tier of those that is served.
Great, thank you. This one's a little more straightforward. Bozeman just passed a ban on short-term rentals. Would you, as mayor, consider such a policy in Missoula? And Andrea?
So I am open to conversations in this space and others. I recognize the complexity of the ordinance that Bozeman just passed. Bozeman has on average about 3% of their housing stock as short-term rentals. And when Missoula did their survey, when we did our survey, it was about 1% of the housing stock. I will say I think it's always a good idea to go back out and survey and make sure we know what's happening in the market. And I do think it's worth taking a look at. Housing is a static element of an economy. And it is a challenge when there are homes that are taken off the market and not available for our local workforce or people that are retiring here. That said, I know people personally that are able to pay their mortgage and taxes because they rent an apartment above their garage. So it is a nuanced issue. It is complex, but it is absolutely one that I am open to dialogue about what would work for Missoula.
Thank you. Mike?
Nothing around short-term rentals is simple. We've actually been talking about it on council quite a bit, including this past Wednesday in my committee that I chair, the Land Use and Planning Committee. There are areas where I feel strongly that what is being put in the neighborhood wasn't intended to be vacation rentals. There are a lot of areas, such as Franklin to the Fort, that are experiencing a lot of infill. And I don't think that people are making those sacrifices in those neighborhoods to see short-term rentals. At the same time, so much of the study that Andrea referenced deals with short-term rentals that aren't necessarily year-round short-term rentals. So by saying you can't do this, we're not necessarily putting a house back into the market. It's just something that may just sit there empty. So there's a conversation that we need to have, but it's not as simple as a yes or no, and I don't think it helps anybody in Missoula to suggest that it is.
Thank you. We're going to move to a new category on budget and taxes. And we start here with, we prioritize questions that came in for people that are here tonight. Many services and programs provided by the city are essential and needed by our residents. Last year, the city council voted to increase taxes by 11%. What would be your plans to address the increased needs that will result from the vote and increase?
No?
It's, that second part doesn't make sense. What are your plans to address the city's needs given this increase in taxes?
You know, we're at a major crisis point in Missoula, for lack of a better word. There are seniors on fixed incomes who are struggling to keep up with the increases. Inflation is hitting local government hard. Even in the budget that passed this year with the increase you mentioned, there's still $4 million of ARPA money from the federal government and MRA money that's covering expenses that we're already in a deficit. We need to implement budgeting that gives us the tools to compare programs that we might like. Programs that at some point council said this was a good idea, but we need criteria to evaluate those. I'd like to see us return to a zero-based budgeting format where department heads identify what is statutorily required in their departments to start, and then we build from that. That's not to say that everything the city does should be statutorily required, because there are a lot of things that the state is failing on that we have to pick up the slack. But we have to be prepared to have those conversations and put some criteria on how we make them.
Yeah, I think the point that Mike made about that $4 million in the budget is notable to say that that is not necessarily the increase in people's property taxes, but that is an increase in the budget. I think one of our opportunities for local government is to continue to be as open and transparent as possible about our budget and our budget process. Similarly, we need to have the open dialogue with our constituents about some tough decisions in this coming year. Because what was just noted, $4 million in the city's budget that was just passed is one-time only money. Will not be there next year for some very important things. And we're going to have conversations together about what we're willing to do. And additionally, I would like to be able to utilize the experience I have used at Homeward to do workflow assessment to examine what opportunities we can innovate and create some efficiencies in city government to reduce the cost to taxpayers.
Thank you. This is a follow-up to that. First question, most municipalities annually fund basic services. This is permanent funding for basic city services. However, it appears the permanent funding definition for new and/or additional city services means that once established, these services will always be funded at the level set. How does this concept tie into no sacred cows and zero-based budgeting? And Andrea, you're going to start on this one.
Thank you. A couple of good examples, I believe, of what that question's referring to is our parks and road districts. Missoula was one of the later cities in the city of Missoula, or the state of Montana, to pull out some of those essential services outside of our general fund. Many of you, you're here and you've probably heard us talk about this before, or others. The state of Montana's statutory requirements for municipal general funds state that our general funds only grow by 1/2 of a 3-year rolling average of inflation. So if you've ever done a budget of your own or you have a pro forma, you know that you are actually carrying something into the red going forward. So we are going to have conversations about what does that mean, permanent financing for other important core services, even roads and parks, where we may need to decrease areas that are not constitutionally or statutorily required by the city.
Thank you. And Mike?
Could you restate that question? I want to make sure that I answer it.
Most municipalities annually fund basic services. This is permanent funding for basic city services. However, it appears the permanent funding definition for new and/or additional city services means that once established, these services will always be funded at the level set. How does this concept tie into no sacred cows and zero-based budgeting?
You know, the budget decisions that the mayor presents and the council makes are what is determined for that year. So whether something's permanent or not, if they choose not to put it in the budget, it won't be funded and it's not part of it. So outside of statutory requirements, I really truly believe that the budget cycles I've sat through on council have shown me that if we're going to make changes, it has to come from the mayor's office. We need to evaluate programs. We need to start earlier in the year, be more transparent with the public, and try and find ways to get out of the council bubble and find out what our priorities are across the way. And we can make differences. It's not responsible, and I don't think you're going to hear either one of us say that, oh, we should cut X percent across the board, because that's not how you run a business. That's not how you make good decisions. But if we apply criteria and find those efficiencies and determine if this still makes sense today, or if maybe the world has shifted in the last 15 years since it was implemented, I really do think we can make a difference, and that starts in the mayor's office.
Thank you. The next question is, with the growth in Missoula population, how do you propose to direct and fund the fire department and the police department? And Mike, you will begin.
The fire department and the police department are our two largest general fund line items. They provide two of the most important services that Missoulians expect. When you call 911, you want people to arrive, and you want them to arrive quickly. The fire levy that was going to be on the ballot but was pulled off is still a major need. Within the department, we have not hired firefighters that ride trucks. We haven't created new positions since 2008. That has been pushed down the road. We're sorely lacking on a new fire station, and we have to make that a priority. So when I talk about budgeting based on priorities, we need to identify those things that Missoulians absolutely expect and make sure that we're funding them properly, and then move on to some of the other items. So police and fire will always be a priority in my budget, because I've ridden along with people from both of those departments, and I've seen firsthand what they're facing, and I know that they need our support now more than ever.
Andrea?
So you did see that the city council had to make a tough decision and pull the fire levy off of our ballot this fall. And that will be a conversation that comes back to us as a community, both city mayor, city council, and the public this coming year. And we'll have to decide if that is something that we're ready to increase our taxes for. And I think it's a good conversation to be having as far as, you know, the benefits that we get as taxpayers and what we invest in as a community. As we take a look across the budget, we'll have to find ways that we are alleviating taxpayers' burden in this case. One of the efficiencies that I see and I have heard as I've met with different members of the fire department, mobile support team, and others is an opportunity to take a look at the way we dispatch. I think there is efficiencies that can also help us increase our services. And that is an area that we not only need to pay attention to staffing and retention, but also service delivery in that space for public safety.
Thank you. We're going to shift to another category now, and these have to do with just the job as mayor. The first one, and Andrea will begin. What do you think the biggest struggle will be in transitioning into the mayor if elected?
Well, for me personally, the biggest struggle will be transitioning out of a 15-year career as an executive director. I love my job, and I am already having to make plans in case I'm elected. And we are underway with that work right now. Somebody described to me transition as like walking out one room, standing in the hallway, not being able to find the door to the other room. The lights are off. It's either too hot or too cold. And I can tell you that, you know, transition can take a while. And that will be, for me, I would say personally, that will be one of the largest. Personally, it's something that I have invested my life into, and it has been an amazing career. It is something that I will mourn for, I think, as most people do when they dedicate their lives to something. But that's okay, because that's what happens when you step up and you step out. but I will recognize that that'll be difficult.
Great. Mike?
The interesting thing about this election is that whoever wins becomes mayor in a matter of weeks after that election starts. This is not a term that starts in January. It's a term that starts right away. And I think, frankly, we don't have time for transition. We have to be ready to go from day one. And the biggest transition I see is identifying where to start and where to put the tremendous and well-educated staff resources on priorities that are currently going and maybe ones that we're going to shift in another direction to try and alleviate some of these problems we see in public safety, in housing, in roads, even urban deer, to make some of the people in my ward happy. And it's recognizing that we can't do everything all at once, but making sure that we are empowering our staff at all levels, not just management, to come up with ideas, to share them, and to consider things we haven't done before. And I'm ready to do that from day one.
Thank you. Serving as the executive, speaking of staff, officer of the city with over 900 employees indirectly reporting to them is an essential role mayors will play if elected. How do you describe your operations leadership style, and what do you hope to accomplish internally within the first 6 months of office?
My leadership style is one that many people who have worked for me over the years can attest to. I run a company that has 18 offices across the state, nearly 300 people, and the people that work for me would tell you that I am a firm believer in making sure they understand what our mission and vision is, making sure they have the tools to succeed, but not micromanaging them. Because as the executive of an organization that's got 900 people and in a city that's got 75,000, we can't get down into the weeds. We need to make sure that we're providing the vision and making sure that the people who are experts in the area are able to do their job and do it well. And to me, what we do from day one is we start to tackle some of the problems we know are up front. The city of Missoula needs to be better at communicating. I think everybody who's involved in that is a good person and is doing a good job, but we need to make sure that our budget and our efforts speak to modern communication. And that's both in the way we speak to the community, but also how we engage with the legislature in Helena, our federal partners, and all of them.
Thank you. Andrea?
My leadership style is one of collaborative leadership style. We spoke about that earlier. And I am somebody that likes to learn from those that are around me. So coming into a new leadership position like the mayor, I'll be meeting with all of the highly talented staff that will be able to share with me the most important steps that I'll need to know from them. I would say recently I just had an anniversary, a work anniversary, we like to call it at Homeward. And I had a staff member share with me that Andrea is somebody that not only makes me want to work hard for our mission, but she makes me want to strive for our community. And that is something that makes it just makes me so incredibly happy to know that that is the culture of the place that I can help influence. First 6 months, we're going to have to be focused on a comprehensive plan to address homelessness, what we'll do for the Johnson Street facility since it's on a 1-year timeline, and the budget cycle should start early this year. So that'll be my first priorities.
Great, thank you. The next question that came in today from the public. The police commissioner's review of officer conduct and complaints is done in secret, which appears to violate at least a couple of laws. Transparent oversight of police is essential to both public safety and law enforcement's legitimacy. As mayor, how will you encourage public oversight of the commission? What characteristics or values will you look for when you appoint members to the commission? And Andrea, you're up first.
In this area, I will be seeking support from those that that folks that are sharing this concern from the community. This is, I will say that this particular issue is something that I'm eager to learn more and hear more about. I do believe that Chief Collier is an exemplary human being, and I do think that leadership really does set the tone for the department. Of the individuals I've had the opportunity to meet on the street, for example, when folks are doing some of the urban camping sweeps, I have personally just met unbelievably upstanding police officers on our force. That said, if there are decisions that are to be made more transparently and in the public, then that will be something that I strive for. And I'll be eager to hear about these concerns from the public and from other members of the city so we can move forward in a very transparent manner.
Great, thank you. And then finally, this is,
I didn't get
I'm
answered.
sorry,
That one yet.
excuse me, sorry, Mike.
All right. Hopefully you haven't started the clock yet. Transparency in policing is very important. Chief Collier stood right where you are right now and advocated to council to improve our body cam packages for police officers so that the public can have more accountability if something does go wrong. And I was really actually proud of him because he stood up and said, we want to be accountable as a police force. We want to be trusted and we want to show that we've earned it. And to me, that's exactly what we want in a leader. And that's the type of accountability that I was proud to support. That technology will now be cutting edge. It's going to be very easy for victims and defense to be able to access information in almost real time, and it puts our police officers in a much safer position, both protecting themselves and the community. And I think we just need to take that commitment to transparency that our chief has said will be top down and apply that to the commission as well. And I'll look for that when I'm appointing people.
Thank you. The arts and creative community play an important role in the economic vitality and well-being of Missoula. What would you do to protect and nurture this sector? And Mike, you're first.
To be perfectly honest, the first and biggest thing I will do is work to make it affordable for them to live here. Because I know, having artists in my family, that people don't necessarily go into the world of arts to make a lot of money. And a place like Missoula is an expensive community. So when we talk about who we're fighting for, that is exactly who we're fighting for. And I think that's number one. Outside of that, the culture of Missoula is what makes it special. It's what makes people be willing to come here and stay here. And a lot of times you'll hear in the business community that there's a Missoula discount because they could get people to take less money to live in Missoula because of all that is here. We've seen the community invest in this time and again, and I will absolutely be a big advocate for the arts and our relationship with sister cities around the world and all the great things that come from partnerships with the university and with all the culture that brings in for us.
Great. Thank you. Andrea?
Yeah, absolutely. Addressing affordability is a huge issue. I am the daughter of a professional ceramicist, and so when we talk about starving artists, I know that story. People said, "Are you going to be a potter when you grow up?" And I was like, "Oh no!" But I do have to say that I love it. And in addition to an affordable home, also a studio space. And so, studio space is wonderful to have in your home if you have the ability. But also through our zoning code, making it show that it's flexible for makerspace. We need to make sure that we don't overly prescribe our zoning code to the point where folks can't have a good place to set up a workshop. The other thing I would say is that the city does invest currently. We own the art museum building. We need to maintain that building in all of its grandeur that it is, and other investments in Arts Missoula and others. We do have some of the best arts that Montana has to offer. It is absolutely not only a benefit for people visiting, but for our residents that are here.
Thank you. We're going to move to another category from the sublime to one that's most difficult, and that is the issue of our unhoused population here. First question is, and Andrea will start. Given the Ninth Circuit Court ruling relating to the housing of those without the means to afford housing, and given the recent Wall Street Journal article identifying Missoula as a city with one of the worst houseless neighbor problems in the West, how will you propose to manage the public property within the city? Will you allow urban camping on all public property, or will you direct it to certain districts? For example, will you allow urban camping on taxpayer-maintained parkways adjacent to taxpayer homes? Andrea, you start on this one, please.
Okay, thank you for the question. So, as many may know or might not know, there are 20 attorney generals in the United States that have asked the Supreme Court for a decision related to the two rulings that are dictating Missoula's response to enforcement of homelessness and urban camping. Those rulings have made it very difficult for cities, large and small, because we have both businesses and civil liberty organizations suing a city. Not to say, though, homelessness should not be a crime. And so our comprehensive plan to address homelessness should be able to tell folks where they can be and where they can't be. Some of those places where they cannot be will include adjacency to immediate residential property, potentially. I can't say exactly where those are right now, but I do support having a way that we not only continue to find ways that people have emergency shelter, but when people are sleeping outside, that we actually have a place for people to go and not just skirting them around.
Thank you. And Mike?
This is a complex issue, but the bottom line is that our parks, our trails, our riparian areas should be set aside for what their intended purposes are. And especially if we are going to commit to funding things like a year-round shelter, part of the bargain when we're asking the taxpayers to pay for things is that we will protect what they've already invested in. And it was referenced earlier, our Parks District and this community over the years has invested so much in our parks, and I think they're some of the best in the region. People deserve to be able to use those for their intended purposes. This is a complex issue, and the Ninth Circuit certainly does not help. The attorney generals are asking the Supreme Court to look into this, and we'll see what that outcome is, but it doesn't really change the fact that you can't just tell someone, oh, don't be homeless, and it solves it. We need to work collaboratively to make sure what we are spending money on is actually helping, that we're not just enabling behavior, but that we are truly giving people the opportunity to make change in their lives and also protecting safe spaces for their intended purposes.
Thank you. In 2012, the city of Missoula adopted a 10-year plan to end homelessness. In 2022, that 10-year plan expired, and it is obvious that the homeless population has increased. Why should Missoula taxpayers continue to permanently fund this policy? And Mike, you are starting this.
So there isn't one policy that's tied to the former 10-year plan to end homelessness. There's lots of different areas where the community has tried over the years. Some of them have been successes. The temporary safe outdoor space it has a barrier to entry, and people have to commit to either working to find a job or find permanent housing. That's had about a 1 in 2 success rate. There was also an authorized campsite that was no barrier, and the city quickly learned that did not work, and they could not do it in that form again. So I think we've learned a lot of lessons. But like I said previously, it's not as simple as just saying don't be homeless and people aren't here. We as a community need to work to address these problems and stop trying to solve it as one large group, but get down more into what the differences are between families who might have had one bad break and lost their apartment and are living in their car, and somebody who's addicted to a substance use problem or has issues that the federal government and the state government haven't funded that are falling to us to solve. And I think that we can bring accountability to the whole process if we stop trying to solve it as one large swath, but actually take things in individual cases.
Thank you. And Andrea?
Yeah, one thing I would like to point out about the title of that document is that it was a requirement of the federal government at the time for communities that were receiving federal funds to call it a 10-year plan to end homelessness. We all knew we're not going to end this in 10 years, and we're not going to end it in another 10 years, because that's the reality of the market and the economy that we are in this country. Now, we can work hard to put solutions in place, and we have. One of the strategies that came out of the 10-year plan to end homelessness was permanent supportive housing. That is what we just built as part of our Trinity project. 30 homes as part of those 202 homes are what we call permanent supportive housing. That means that there are small rental apartments that have rental subsidy and 24-hour wraparound services that are voluntary for folks. The temporary safe outdoor space was mentioned, and that is a place that you have prerequisites to move into. Not everybody's going to. The Blue Heron is a place where people that are called frequent utilizers of system engagement. That means the folks that we are seeing in our parks that are going to emergency rooms, the jails, the hospitals, half of the fuse list has been housed because Blue Heron is built. That is a success.
Thank you. And finally, in this category, and it might take some context that I invite you both to add, the question is, what did you learn from the Sleepy Inn purchase by the city? And Andrea, you will begin, please.
I learned that there is an opportunity for better communication and transparency around that purchase. I was involved with what was happening at the state level when the federal government provided the, quite frankly, the fire hose of federal funding that came into the state of Montana through the American Rescue Plan Act. And we had the ability, and the city, I believe, was actually quite innovative in addressing a critical need during the COVID pandemic, which was finding a space that folks that were living in shelter could isolate in order to not spread the virus. I do believe that there are the use of tax increment financing dollars for that purpose locally, but then actually having the operations paid for through federal dollars was a brilliant response. Many people don't understand that, and now we are sitting on a very valuable piece of property that will be sold, and those dollars will go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that is an investment for affordable housing in Missoula.
Great, thank you. Mike?
I wasn't on city council when that purchase came through. There was obviously a need in the moment, and with COVID and the sheltering options, it absolutely served that need. I do think the city paid too much for it. And sometimes in emergencies, the situation presents itself and you just have to make a decision, and that's what the city did. But we're seeing now that even with the building torn down, the value is not the same as what it was. There was a lot of federal money that basically paid rent. So I have heard people complain about how this penciled out, but the reality is that when it's all said and done, the city of Missoula will come out ahead. I think we also learned that it was very difficult to operate, and much like we talked earlier, how the city isn't ever really going to be in the development game, they don't want to be in that game either. We are not a service provider or a facility that manage those things. We have to have partners, and I think it met the moment, but it's not something that I would like to see us repeat.
Thank you. We're going to switch to in general, a more lighthearted category. And let me begin by this one, with this one. What is your favorite Missoula public park and why? What would you like to add to our park system? And that's Mike.
Oh, it's not that bad. I would have been okay if you went first.
Got some ideas here, yeah.
I think so many of our public parks are just amazing. And I also think so many of the special things that are in and near our public parks that aren't necessarily public parks are great too. I talked about the carousel at one of our forums earlier this week, and I just think those things that make the heart of Missoula. Playfair Park has always been special to me. I represent Ward 4 on city council. I used to play soccer and baseball there as a kid. And forever there was a drinking fountain that had my grandfather's name on it. He served Missoula on city council and at the state legislature. He was a big advocate for labor. And when he passed away young, well before I was born, they dedicated this fountain to him. And a few years ago, it got hit by a lawnmower and fell down. But when my father retired, the city actually committed to putting a new drinking fountain up, and there's going to be a plaque for my grandfather and my father. And I love seeing that commitment to public service being recognized by two individuals that really dedicated their lives to making Missoula a better place, and I'm proud to be following behind them.
Great.
That's a cool story.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm biased. My favorite park in Missoula is in my neighborhood, and that's Franklin Park. I live in the Franklin to Fort neighborhood. I walk or take a little jog down there almost daily. It is a quiet park, but when I moved into that neighborhood over 20 years ago, it was kind of a scary place to be. And the city of Missoula did the aquatics bond. And not only did we build currents, but we also replaced the old turtle ponds that were basically dysfunctional and not functioning with splash decks and some other playground amenities. And that little park has turned out to be such an amazing place for community. So there's a large irrigation ditch that flows around it, and a property that I built there when I worked for the Missoula Housing Authority. I built 3 duplexes, and we built a bridge across the irrigation ditch, and that bridge connects that street to that park, and I watch people walk across it all the time, and it just reminds me of what's possible.
Great. Well, it wouldn't be a forum without this question. With the recent increase in bear sightings in Missoula, how do you propose the city can contribute to mitigating this issue and ensuring public safety? Andrea.
Well, I want to applaud the city council for adopting the bear ordinance. That is a fantastic move forward, and it is about time we have done something like that in our community. I'm from Northwest Montana, so I'm from Grizz country, and I have to tell you that I'm a firm believer that we live in bear country, and we all love that, right? We love Montana for those reasons, and we have a responsibility. So I think as we work to educate the community, I really do think that the city, along with our partners, our private partners, have the opportunity to do public information campaigns. We used to do this a lot more frequently. I mean, we used to do this around the ways that we bike down the sidewalk, or not sidewalk, but the trails, and watch for one another, or things like, stopping at crosswalks. This is an opportunity for us to make sure that people are utilizing their trash cans appropriately, and then we can move to the next tranche of attractants, which are basically dog food and bird feeders.
Thank you. Mike?
The health department put a lot of thought into the recent bear policy, and it came before council, and I was happy to support it because we do need to make a difference. That being said, I think we need to be thinking about what the attractants are. And we need to open our relationship with fish, wildlife, and parks to better kind of understand this urban wildlife interface that we live in Missoula, and what are some of the things that we're doing to create this. I joked about urban deer earlier, but the reality is that we have an urban deer population that is way beyond what anybody would consider healthy. They're in Missoula, it's a safe space. Their only natural predators, generally cars. With climate change, bears are coming down out of the mountains earlier, and they're actually attracted by some of the same things that deer are creating in our environment. So we need to have kind of that tough conversation with fish, wildlife, and parks to examine all of what we're doing around wildlife and how they connect to each other, and we need to be responsible in how we solve it.
Great. Thank you. Next question is, what is your most deeply held value, and how does it relate to what government should and should not do? And Mike?
I think that it's important to be genuine and true to who you are. And throughout this campaign, I've been really proud of building relationships across party lines and with people who don't generally interact with government and those who are involved in it every day. But at the end of it, I always joke people will say, well, you're so straightforward, and when you talk, you're so transparent. And I always just say that it's easier to tell the truth because you don't have to remember anything. But I think that actually is so missing in government in some ways, not in local government in Missoula very much. It's full of great people who have the best intentions in mind. But I think it's something that I bring, that the people who have worked for me throughout my career, worked with me throughout my career, gone to school with me, grew up with me, can vouch for. I am who I am, and you get what I am bringing every day. And I think that genuineness is really important in Missoula right now.
That's a really good question. It's always like, what's the one value that I would want to hold dear and bring into office? Because boy, I would hope we'd want a few, right? I mean, I think what I would highlight for the one value that I bring forward is communication. It's been something that has helped me succeed through my life, my career. I do love to talk, but I do love to talk about complex issues and help break down complex issues into digestible ways that folks can understand them. That has been the only way that I have been able to turn the tide of people understanding why they should care about people being able to afford their home. You might hear my people say this, and it's something I'm really proud of. We took on a project years ago at my organization around how we talk about a home that somebody can afford. And so you'll hear people say affordable units. Nobody goes in a home to a unit, but we do go to the home that we can afford, a home that Montanans can afford. And that is something that I think has a lot of power.
Great. Tthank you. Our next category of questions have to do with various aspects of our citizenry. Both candidates have identified affordable childcare as a need which is not typically the role or the responsibility of city government. Yet, how do you see the city being involved in reducing the cost of childcare for Missoula's families? What do you estimate the city's taxpayer cost for this type of involvement? Let's just start with, how do you see the city being involved in providing affordable childcare?
I see an opportunity for the city to utilize resources it does have at its disposal through tax increment financing districts. The city council can help set policy for the Missoula Redevelopment Agency to utilize tax increment financing to help establish affordable facilities where businesses could establish childcare businesses. So I think that is an opportunity for us as we take a look across our districts. Secondly, the city itself, in terms of our human resource package and what we're offering our employees. As many of you know, the city and the county are partnering on the federal building, and we will be looking to consolidate space into that historic building. And I do think that it is a real opportunity for us to make sure that we create childcare opportunities for our own staff close to employment. We know that that makes a huge difference in families' lives.
Great, thank you. Mike?
Earlier, when I talked about affordability, this is one of the biggest things that's hitting Missoula families. My wife and I spent over $15,000 last year on childcare, and that's minimal compared to some people. That's a mortgage payment. Maybe not so much now with the interest rates, but that's a huge investment, and it's a stressor on people's lives. My kids went to the same daycare and preschool for 9 years consecutively. My son started, and then as soon as he was done, my daughter went. And we had to do that, get on a waiting list and be part of that. So wherever the city can help, we need to, but the city is not going to be a childcare provider. We do a ton of great stuff with kids through Parks and Rec, and I'm committed to being part of that. We also have to partner with people who are doing this work. When I was president of the United Way, we kind of became the parent organization for the Missoula Child Care Advantage, which applied for and received a grant from the state to try and revolutionize childcare in Missoula. And there was a groundbreaking last week at the elementary school over Cold Springs. And that is absolutely an opportunity to provide a backbone where service providers can join up and do what they do best, which is focus on the front service, but work together on the back to share things like HR and those things.
Thank you. At the other end of life's continuum, the city's website states that 25% of our population is over age 65. What does this mean in terms of the city policy and your own leadership? Mike?
You know, I have actually said for years that one of the biggest under-discussed challenges we face in our housing market is seniors with no place to go. We have a huge downsizing problem, which then blocks any churn in a marketplace, but people don't want to spend more to downsize. And that that creates all sorts of problems. So earlier you heard talk about a community land trust, and there are pros and cons to community land trusts. They create affordable home ownership opportunities, but they don't really let people build equity. And they bring stability, and I think it's great, and I support them. But I actually think that we should explore more of the community land trust option towards senior living, because we're less concerned about building equity, but we want to make sure people still have the stability to come home to a secure place every night, to be able to host their family and to be able to do that, and then allow them to downsize and create that already existing home as an opportunity for somebody else, their family, to grow into it.
Thank you. Andrea?
Yeah, you bet. Not only is 25% of our population now, but we will continue to age. Montana is one of the oldest states in the nation, and we are projected to be, I want to say, fifth the last time I looked, by 2030. And that, don't cite me on that. I have to go back and look depending on who our last population increases. But we are an aging state, and similar to the points that Mike just made, a housing financing model that we've looked into over the years and we've seen successfully deployed here is the cooperative model. That is something where it is an opportunity to downsize. You purchase basically a share like in a corporation and you buy your home, but you really are buying into a community. And that is something that has real legs, I think, in Missoula. In addition to affordable living, obviously we're going to need to address the property tax issue for seniors and those that are living on fixed incomes that may not be able to benefit from current state tax credits that are available to low-income homeowners now.
Thank you. The United States faces a mental health crisis coupled with a shortage of mental health clinicians, a challenge especially in the state of Montana. In light of this, how do you envision the city's responsibility in addressing mental health needs of residents, particularly those in at-risk populations? Andrea?
Yeah. You're absolutely right. We have had a defunding or a lack of funding at the federal level for decades, and we are seeing the results of that, as well as the state of Montana. You know, when we cut funding in 2017, I can tell you I saw the impacts to the residents living in our buildings, and the state of Montana has never increased their funding to the same level since. So I do believe that the mayor has an opportunity to be a vocal advocate on behalf of our community, not only at the state level, but at the federal level. In addition, some of the other things that I talked about earlier, you heard me talk about Blue Heron Place. That is where we're partnering with mental health care providers like All Nations Health Center and Partnership Health Center that will be bringing the care that they offer to affordable homes and folks that are living in crisis. The last thing I would say is that Missoula has gotten out in front of this issue when it comes to public safety with our mobile support team. It is a fantastic initiative, and that is something I would absolutely continue to support.
Thank you. Mike?
You know, there are a lot of things that fall to local government, and often they become unfunded mandates. And some of them are statutory, like you will do this and you'll figure out how to pay for it. And others are simply because every other level of government has abdicated their responsibility. And mental health is absolutely one of those. Since the 80s at the federal level, and then even as recently as 2017 in the legislature in Montana, the levels of government that are supposed to be helping solve these big societal problems have been failing. So it falls down to communities like Missoula, who then have to try and figure out how to address substance abuse and mental health when the property tax system isn't even set up to do it. So we need to work with our private partners, but we also need to take steps to make sure we're doing what we can. And I was proud to vote to commit the city to a 3-year lease for the mobile response team, so that will be a part of our government, even though it is funded by temporary dollars right now in our budget, because we need to give families a choice beyond the emergency room or jail. And that program is helping.
Thank you. We're going to move to some policy-related questions. The first one has to do with a local government review. Next year, voters will decide if they want to conduct a local government review or study of Missoula's city government. Will you support the study? And then if voters decide they want to do a study, what role could the neighborhood councils play in that study? Mike, I'm going to ask you to start, please.
Absolutely. This would not be an event partnered with the League of Women Voters if we did not advocate for the government study commission. I think it's great. My grandfather was one of the 100 men and women who helped write Montana's Constitution in the 1970s. And this ability for the government at the local level to evaluate every 10 years and say, does what we're doing make sense, is something that is so unique to places like Montana that it really is something that should be encouraged. And that doesn't mean we need to change government every 10 years, but it says, hey, we want to make sure that we're transparent, that this is operating the way it's supposed to, or hey, maybe there's a better way. And I think that if that question goes to voters and they say, yes, we want to do this, the Office of Neighborhoods and the neighborhood councils are such a tremendous conduit to reach out and have people understand first what the process is, but how they can get involved and how they can make a difference. It's democracy at its finest when people are involved who aren't normally involved in government.
I'm glad you know the League of Women Voters. Andrea.
Yes, I absolutely would support this. As Mike said, this is a constitutional right that we have in the state of Montana and responsibility as citizens here in Missoula. So, as many of you might know, we didn't vote to do that 10 years ago, and so we'll see what the voters decide to do in 2024. The neighborhood councils are a fantastic opportunity. I will tell you that knocking on doors, and I know that the neighborhood councils definitely did take a drop during the pandemic, like most things did. But I was knocking on doors this summer, and I was in the Lewis and Clark neighborhood, and I was talking with the president of that neighborhood council, and we were talking about what the city's budget has always been, which is like $500 to buy treats and something like that to encourage, and encourage participation and apply for a neighborhood grant occasionally. But they have real concerns about their neighbors down the street being able to stay in their home and afford food and afford childcare. And he asked me, what can we do as a neighborhood council to actually be responsive to burgeoning needs? And I think we should take advantage of that. This is an opportunity to take a look at that.
Great. Thank you. The city has officially embraced a resolution to reaffirm its dedication to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, or JEDI, principles, emphasizing the need to apply this lens in decision-making. How do you plan to effectively integrate that? And then I'm combining this with another question. If so, how do you plan to increase diversity and inclusion in city employment? And this one is for Andrea to begin.
Okay, thank you. I have undertaken similar work at my own organization, and we call the committee there an anti-racist diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's got a long title, but it's direct. And I will take my experience there and further the efforts that the city has already done. The opportunities for us to collaborate with, indigenous nations, for example. We know that there is right now a program through the Department of Environmental Quality with the Salish College where we can make job postings and find folks that are getting their degrees up in Ronan for potential positions that would be eligible for our job postings here in Missoula. And I think that we should do that direct outreach and targeting and make those opportunities well known. That's one example.
Thank you. Mike?
I think this work is very important, and I think it's one of the most misunderstood things that local government's doing right now. And I think that part of that is a failure on us to maybe communicate and explain and understand where people are coming from. But I also think that the attention to this as a function of city government is relatively new across the country. And as we implement this, we need to make sure that we aren't simply checking boxes, but that we have genuine relationships and that we are creating opportunities to actually hear people and to hear all the different cultures that surround us in this community and in our neighboring communities in the region to make a difference. And I had the opportunity on council several months ago to sit through a 2-day session with a facilitator that the city has engaged with. And at the end of the 2 days, nobody in the room could say what the goal was. And the people in the room were council members, they were members of the mayor's staff, they were city employees, and nobody could say, this is what our goal is. So I think we need to make sure that we aren't just spending money to say we're doing it, but that we're actually making a difference in the community.
Thank you. This is our final question, and I thank whoever in the with us tonight wrote this for us, because it's perfect. It appears that both of you are closely aligned on many issues. Considering this, what do you believe best distinguishes you as the best candidate for mayor? Andrea? Oh, no, yeah. Okay, sorry,
This is maybe the 13th or 14th time we've been asked this question. It's difficult when you like each other, you know? I bring a very broad experience to this job. I've served on council for the last year and a half, and that's given me the opportunity to be experienced in how the city works and to build those relationships, but not so entrenched that I can't make a difference. I think that some of the reasons that some on council or in the administration might view me skeptically are because I'm willing to ask questions and ruffle feathers sometimes. And, I think that taking that experience as a small business owner, as somebody who operates a large organization across the state, but also someone who's served in the nonprofits in our community and also serves on city council, and building that foundation to really try and bring the experiences that Missoulians are seeing and hearing and living every day and bringing that into our decision-making process is something that I think my broad experience is not matched on.
thank you. Andrea?
Yeah, I have both a broad experience as well as deep experience in the career that I've had for the last 22 years. Something that I know to be true, and even folks that recently I was working with a colleague who said, boy, if you know housing, you know the community. And that is because this line of work touches literally every sector of our economy and our community. And because of having served as an executive for 15 years, where I am working as with a board of directors, so similar to city council, and addressing community needs, taking those community needs, developing a strategy, and then deploying that strategy to impact our community. That is what the mayor will be doing alongside council and working with our city staff. And the experience I have as an executive, I think, translates very closely and very well for that.
Thank you very much. We are now moving for 2-minute closing statements from each of you. And it should flow really well. But Andrea?
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you again for this opportunity, and I want to thank everybody for being here tonight and taking interest in your local government. I think what I really want to impart with you is why I'm stepping into this position and why I'm excited about it. I have this desire to serve. It's been with me since a small child, and that's why I've been doing the work that I have for 22 years. And I truly am, I feel like answering a calling to some degree to serve our community. And I have been asked over the years by people that I love and respect, that are civic leaders here in Missoula as well as statewide, and friends of mine, to consider running for public office. And that made me think long and hard about why. Why is that? And sometimes it takes other people for you to recognize that you have something to offer to help continue to make great strides and improvements for your community. And I believe that I'm the right person at the right time to do that. And I do want to recognize Mr. Nugent for the campaign that we've been leading because we both love this community. And it's been a really good campaign together. It has been a great conversation. It's something that in my time here, I haven't seen this much energy going forward. Recently, somebody that has come into my life recently as part of being a candidate shared with me something she pulled off her wall from February of 2020. And she is a deeply religious woman. And it was a proverb about answering the call. And she said, I want you to have this because this reminds me of you and what is happening right now and what I see around the community. And that is why I'm doing this. And so I want to thank you for your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mike.
You know, I'm running for mayor because I think Andrea is a great director of Homeward, and I don't want her to leave that job. I mean, I'm genuinely serious. I think you're great there. You know, being a part of this community is great. I'm born and raised here. So much of who I am and what I am comes from people who have come before us and been willing to help out and volunteer. You know, I have the pleasure of coaching youth sports quite a bit when I'm not running for mayor. The last year has not really provided that opportunity, but you learn a lot of lessons when you're working with kids. And, you know, they wear their heart on their sleeves, but they also, you know, treat everybody with an earnestness and a fairness. And one of the things you learn as a coach is you treat everybody the same, but you coach them differently because different people need different encouragement, different issues need different solutions. And we need to be willing to kind of take a broad approach to how we do things as a community. We can't take a one-size-fits-all approach to city government. It will not work. We have to understand that just because we've done something one way for a long time doesn't mean that that's the only way. And we have to empower both our staff and our community to not be afraid to suggest new things and to reach new ideas and maybe create environments where they can say those where maybe they haven't previously. And, you know, that hard work in the end will be worth it. But we face challenges in Missoula and across the country. At the end of the Obama administration, they issued a report that said one of the biggest barriers to creating affordable housing was actually progressive homeowners who have theirs, but then advocate against policies that help other people. And in Missoula, we have a 45% home ownership rate. We are failing. And that is decreased by about 10% over the last 10 years. We should not be protecting the way we've always done things. And we should question why people who have been a part of those things are trying so hard to hold on to them. And I am proud to be part of this conversation. I'm proud to sit here next to my friend Andrea, who I believe we've gotten to know each other very well over these last 6 months. And I'm proud to be a son of Missoula and looking forward to the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, candidates, for your thoughtful responses, and most of all, for your willingness to step up and serve the Missoula public as our mayor. November 7th is Election Day. This will be an all-mail-in election. Ballots were mailed yesterday, 20 days prior to the election. Ballots may be returned by the mail or in person to the Missoula County Elections Office. Ballots must be received by the office by Election Day, November 7th at 8 p.m. You must be registered to vote and be listed as an active voter on the registration rolls to receive a ballot. Check your registration information at the My Voter page of the Montana Secretary of State's election website. If you are not registered to vote, contact the Missoula County Elections Office. For additional information about all candidates on the November ballot, we refer you to the nonpartisan online election resource, vote411.org. A great way to make your voice heard and shape the future of your community is to join your local neighborhood council. Please visit the Missoula Neighborhoods webpage at missoula-neighborhoods.org or contact Kalina Pritchard with the neighborhood office for more information. And I would be remiss if I did not invite anyone participating tonight to join the League of Women Voters in our work defending voter rights and strengthening democracy. Membership forms are here this evening, and you can find us easily online. On behalf of the Missoula League of Women Voters, Thank you all for joining us this evening, and remember, your vote counts.